What do all these products have in common? They all contain carrageenan, which comes from farmed seaweed. Carrageenan is a jelly used in foods and other products like the ones shown here to make them thicker or smoother. In factories overseas, a carrageenan is boiled out of the seaweed and dried to a whitish powder. When added to water, it makes a jelly. This is similar to some traditional seaweed dishes made in Pacific Island countries, like this Fijian jelly made by boiling a seaweed called lumidevata. Carrageenan comes from a seaweed called cotonai, which is farmed around the world by villagers from Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Tanzania, Madagascar, Venezuela, Mozambique. Now cotonai is being farmed in Pacific Island countries like Kiribati, Fiji and Solomons. Uses for carrageenan are increasing, and so is the demand for cotonai seaweed. Seaweed farming can be a new source of cash income for coastal communities. Many Pacific Islanders are interested in farming seaweed as a way of making money because it can easily be done by seaside villages. It does not require much equipment, and women, children and men can all be involved. Seaweed farming is also very good because it is not harmful to the marine environment. In this video, we are going to go through step by step how to farm cotonai seaweeds. Just as you would not plant crops of land anywhere, so you have to plant your cotonai seaweed in the right place. Choosing the right place for your cotonai seaweed farm is very important. There are areas which are good for farming seaweed, and there are areas that are not so good. To find the best farm sites in your area, you will need the following things: a tide table so that you know when the tide will be high or low, a thermometer to measure the water temperature, a salinity tester to measure the salt level of the water, a watch with a second hand, and an empty plastic bottle attached to a 5-meter string to measure the flow and direction of water currents at your site. If you don't have any of these things, then they can be borrowed from your fisheries extension officer or seaweed field technician within your area. Planting near seagrass is not good because seagrass attracts fish, which can come and eat your seaweed. Planting near coral heads and coral reefs is not good because it also attracts problem fish. Rabbitfish like this one eat cotonai seaweeds and can cause big problems for cotonai farmers if the wrong site is chosen. A good clean sandy bottom is best for successful growing of seaweed because there will be fewer fish around this type of seabed. The water depth for cotonai seaweed farming should be somewhere between knee deep and waist deep at low tide. If you see other edible species like this one growing in your farm area, it shows that cotonai seaweed will be able to grow here too. However, other tests are also needed to show the site is a good one before you start planting. These tests should be done at half tide, when water flow will be at its most rapid, fastest. Cotonai seaweed needs salty water. Sea saltiness is called salinity, measured in units of parts per thousand. The salinity of seawater for cottonized seaweed farming should be between 25 and 40 parts per thousand, with around 32 parts per thousand being best. A salinity tester is used to measure the salinity at your site. Here the tester is showing a salinity of 35 parts per thousand. The next important thing to measure is temperature. A thermometer is used to measure temperature. Water temperature should be between 23 and 29 degrees Celsius. Another important test is water flow, which can be measured using a plastic bottle partly filled with water so that it only just floats. The bottle should travel the length of a 5-meter string in 25 seconds or less. Remember to take your reading at half tide when tidal flow is strongest. Also make a note of the direction of water flow, since this is important in choosing the layout of your farm. The seaweed lines will need to be planted in a direction parallel to the current flow, so that seaweed plants don't break off or gather floating rubbish. To really be sure that your chosen farm area is going to be a good one, you need to try it out by planting a test plot. A test plot is a small-scale trial, not actual farming yet. By planting 1 or 2 3-meter lines of cottonized seaweed in several places around your reef area, you can find out where the cottonized seaweed grows best. You should not start building your main seaweed farm until seaweed growth results from the test plots show that your farm site is a good one. Farming construction begins with preparing the wooden stakes. Stakes can be made from whatever wood is available. Any bush trees like this one, in Fiji called vaivai, are readily available and last well in sea water. The stakes are cut to 1 meter long and sharpened at one end. They are then driven into the seabed at the farm site. At this farm, the posts are easy to push in by hand because the seabed is sandy and soft. But in other places, they may need to be hammered in with a sledgehammer. The stakes are spaced 10 meters apart. The lines are then stretched between these 2 stakes. The stakes should be placed so that the lines are between 30 and 40 centimeters apart. Planting of seaweed begins with the preparation of the seaweed lines by attaching tie-ties to hold the seaweed in place. There are 2 ways to make the tie-ties. In the first method, the tie-ties are made out of 1 millimeter nylon rope. Wrap a length of the thin rope around a piece of wood wide enough to make each piece 10 centimeters long, and then cut the strings with a kitchen knife. Each piece has its ends sealed together in a flame, forming a loop. Tie-ties are then inserted into the lines at 20 centimeter intervals. This work can be done while socializing with friends. This type of rope tie-tie, as seen here in Indonesia, makes retying of plants much quicker and makes harvesting much easier as well. In the second method, the tie-ties are made out of raffia string. The raffia tie-ties are inserted into the line and spaced 20 centimeters apart. The knot used to attach the raffia tie-tie to the line can be done as shown here. After the tie-ties have been inserted into the lines, the seaweeds chosen for planting are tied on using the tie-ties to hold them. The advantage of the rope tie-tie method is that it lasts longer and makes planting and harvesting easier. The disadvantage is that it takes longer to make this type of line. It is faster to make lines with raffia tie-ties, but the raffia needs to be replaced often, and it takes longer to plant and harvest the seaweed. After the lines have been seeded, they need to be taken back to the farm site for planting. Cotton eye plants will die if left out of water for more than a few hours. The plants will last longer if you protect them from the sun and rain with a plastic cover, and keep plants cool and moist by splashing them with seawater every few minutes. If you plan to tie plants on the lines during the evening, ready to replant the next morning, then you should put the tied-on plants in sacks and leave them in the sea during the night. A plastic rubbish bin is a good way of keeping your plants to protect them from the sun or rain. Remember, the further away your farm site is from your village, the longer it will take you to get there each day, and the cost of outboard fuel will be more. So try and keep the site close to your village if you can. Cotton eye seaweed is planted by attaching the seaweed lines to the wooden stakes driven into the seabed. The best way to attach the rope line is to make a loop at both ends and stretch the line out tight before driving the second stake into the seabed. The lines need to be tight because plants on slack lines will touch the seabed or other lines and get broken off. When the lines are tied to the wooden stakes, they should be about 30 centimeters from the seabed, or about halfway between your knee and your ankle. Regular maintenance is very important for growing cotton eye seaweed. Good farmers do not just plant their seaweeds and then forget about them until harvest. You will get better results if you visit the farm at least twice a week to check for any problems. It is important that sediment is shaken off the seedlings. Otherwise, it will block the sunshine and cotton eye plant growth will be slow. Any rubbish or other kinds of seaweeds tangled on the cotton eye plants should also be removed. If lines have gone slack, make them tight again. Remember, you are farming seaweed, not rope lines. If seaweed is lost from the lines, then your hard work will be wasted. To harvest your cotton eye plants, the lines are removed from the stakes and taken back to the village. Plants should be harvested before they get too big and heavy. Otherwise, they will start breaking off and will be lost. Usually, the cotton eye plants can be harvested 6 weeks after planting. These are the cuttings that could be used for replanting. It weighs about 100 grams. Upon replanting, this is the preferred size for seaweed. This is about 3 weeks old. This is what it looks like after a period of 6 weeks. This one is not really big enough, thus not suitable to be harvested and dried yet. But this is a suitable size for seaweed to be harvested and dried. This is the size for weeds after 6 weeks. Since some of the harvested cotton eye plants will be used as cuttings for replanting, it is important to handle them very carefully so that they stay healthy. Do not tread on your seaweeds or throw them about. Protect them from the sun or rain and keep them wet by throwing water on them. There should not be any fuel or oil in the bottom of the boat that might poison the plants, and they should be kept away from the outboard fuel tanks. Okay, this one is not bad just because the weeds are whiter or paler in shade. If you look at that one, it clearly shows there is disease on it. This one is quite different. It's quite good. This set of seaweed is quite different compared to the other one with the disease on it. So this one is good to use. This is where the disease is. The seaweed cuttings chosen for replanting are put aside out of the sun or rain and kept fresh and healthy. The rest of the seaweed will be thoroughly dried in the sun and then sold to the seaweed buyer. Cottonized seaweed dries best if it is spread out on special drying racks like this one's made from timber and mesh netting. These raised up racks allow the wind to dry the plants both from above and from below. If seaweed is simply spread out on the beach or on grass to dry, it will dry more slowly. It will also get dirty from sand and dried leaves and have to be cleaned before sale. The main advantage of using lines with rope loop tight ties that it makes harvesting easier. Here in Indonesia, we can see plants being rapidly harvested by pulling the line through a narrow slot in a wooden plank. Here we can see the method of harvesting seaweeds from lines with raffia tie ties. The plants have to be pulled off one by one and then scattered on the drying table. For drying to be most effective, seaweeds should be piled as deep as it's shown here, up to the level of your thumb when measured with your hand out straight. If plants are piled any deeper than this, they will take too long to get dry. To speed up the drying of seaweeds, turn the plants over 3 times a day. Rain must not be allowed to fall on the drying cotton eye plants, or the carrageenan jelly will get washed out. If rain is about to fall, the seaweed should be pushed together and covered by a plastic sheet. A line of tight string or wire will stop the sheet from touching the dried plants and making them wet again from condensation. It should be possible to dry your seaweeds within 3 sunny days. The final product should be yellow to purple in color. If it is white, it probably got rained on and it will now be poor quality. If you let your cotton eye plants grow too large, the plants will end up very thick and will be difficult to dry properly. They might look dry from the outside but still be wet on the inside and will start rotting. This is another reason why you should not wait too long before harvesting the seaweed you planted. Some varieties of cotton eye have thinner stems, and these are much easier to dry quickly. Thin plants that dry quickly give best quality to the seaweed buyer. You will know your plants are properly dried if they have a springy feel when squeezed and return to their original shape. Plants that do not spring back to their original shape when squeezed are still too wet and must be dried some more. If the plants are over-dried, they will go very hard and sharp like glass, and seaweed buyers do not want this. Take out any rubbish from the seaweed and shake off the salt, then pack the dried seaweeds into sacks. A seaweed buyer should visit or operate a buying station near you at least twice a month. If the buyer is not visiting your area regularly, complain. If you live in a remote area, you may have to travel some distance to a buying station at first until you are producing big enough quantities to justify the buyer coming to you. Put the dried seaweeds on planks of wood on the ground so that air can circulate around the dried seaweed.